Now, Miss Graham, the first witness, please.
My first witness is Mr. Mark De Giovanni from Advanced Laser Imaging.
Would you say the words of the affirmation after me, please?
My microphone and Mr. Giovanni's on at the same time. It may be that that is causing the issue. So in saying this, I'm hoping that those in the suite behind us will be able to adapt the situation and maybe turn one of the mics off to avoid the feedback. Let's see, it certainly seems to be getting quieter. But
Yeah, I think if I talk it.
could you go and have a word with Barry and Brian, please? We'll, I think this could be slightly difficult. We'll resolve it first.
What if I just move? No, it's still there.
It's still there.
Yeah.
Brian can hear the problem.
Yes, there seems to be some feedback in the room with both the mics being on, and when I speak, we can hear it reverberating.
I think it's more when mine's going.
It might be Mr. De Giovanni's. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. That's fine. Well, that sounds better. I can't hear it so badly. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Is that it? Thank you very much. And for the purposes of today, Mr. Giovanni, you've prepared a PowerPoint, a number of slides in the PowerPoint format, and I intend to take you through those now, if that's possible.
Yes.
Thank you. So we have those on the screen. And the first slide we see says Digital Reconstruction, Sheku Bio Inquiry, and it has your name and that of Dave Marcel
Correct.
at the bottom. And tell us who Dave Marcel is.
David Marcel is also part of Advanced Laser Imaging. He's the technical director. And again, he's similar to myself. He's responsible for delivery of products and helping deliver those products.
Have you worked closely together in preparing the work that you're going to discuss today?
Yes, we have.
Thank you. And can we move on to the next slide, please? This says methodology and process. Would you talk us through the methodology that you've adopted?
So this slide really talks about the layout of the presentation. So initially we're going to talk about advanced laser imaging and how Dave and I effectively got to this point here today. After that, we were going to talk about the terms of reference, the way that we were engaged by the inquiry, and how we initially became involved. From there, we were going to talk about the general principle of reconstruction that we've used in this case. The last three sections will be the technical details. We effectively call them the pillars of the reconstruction, and they're basically the main forms of how we've been able to bring all this together and how we've developed the products for the inquiry.
Thank you very much. Let's turn on to the next slide. This is slide 3, and tell us what we see here. I see your picture, Mr. Giovanni.
So this is more about our, effectively our history. It's one of our standard slides to explain where we're from. Previously, Dave and I worked at the Metropolitan Police Service before forming ALI. In that time, we worked for an area called the Computer-Aided Modeling Bureau. The principal responsibility for that team was to produce reconstructions of pretty much anything and everything police related. So there's a lot of criminal work in there, but we also extended to terrorism and others as well.
And do we see there, under your history section on that slide, Metropolitan Police Service, and that was between 2007 and 2013?
That is correct.
And after you left the Metropolitan Police Service, tell us the sort of work that you did.
Shall I get to the next slide, or do you want to talk about the...
Before we go to that, could
Yeah.
I ask you, you've listed a number of inquiries and such like there at
Yes.
the bottom, because it says Computer Aided Modelling Bureau,
Okay.
and you've listed a number of things. Are these things you've been involved with as ALI?
Yeah, no, this was as the Metropolitan Police. So one of them in there is, for example, the Diana inquest, and it's probably most relevant to what we've done to date. And it was one of the first cases where we utilised 3D modelling and laser scanning in an inquest environment. My colleague Dave Massell in 2003 went to Paris and surveyed the scene, and it was, at the time, it was probably the largest scene that the Met Police had ever tried to attempt with a laser scanner. It was about 1 kilometre long by 500 metres wide, and it involved an underpass as well as the overpass where the incident occurred. So it was a significant undertaking from a survey point of view. At the time, we didn't have the same processes that we've got nowadays, so the whole scene had to be modelled by hand, using a digital system, but it was effectively modelled manually, and then made into a lightweight model that we could then play in live time, in real time, during the inquest. So you'll see many parallels between what I've just described there and what we've done for you for the inquiry.
Thank you. Let's move on to slide 4. Explain to the chair what we see on this slide.
So since we formed Advanced Laser Imaging, we've spread out from just doing police work, and we do casework across a whole range of different courts and different clients as well. So police prosecution represents about 28% of the work that we've taken in the last 3 years. But what we've noticed is that we've got other work in insurance and other legal courts. We've also taken on and started to work a lot more for defence, police and military ombudsmen. And that represents probably the vast majority of our work. But beyond that, we've got more standard surveying type work in terms of digital twin reconstruction. We have been involved in another inquest, which was a historical reconstruction.
Tell us about that inquest, please.
So that relates back to the Troubles in Northern Ireland, and we were asked to reconstruct a scene back to the 1970s, just so that the inquest at that point could understand the layout and the location of the buildings that were no longer in place.
And the green area there, Defence, Police and Military Ombudsman, you've got something mentioned there about a feasibility study. Well, what is that, and what work did you do in relation to that?
So we were approached by a defence counsel, and they were defending a client who was accused of shooting a person as he entered the vehicle. The police had carried out a reconstruction with several experts where they'd physically got the vehicle and they'd placed the person in there. And their conclusions were from their reconstruction that the shot could only have been from the outside of the vehicle. And they wanted to understand from our perspective whether the reconstruction was strong and whether what they'd done was correct. So we went to the vehicle and we surveyed it. When we compared the survey data back to the original crime scene photography, we noticed that the chair seat had moved. What we were able to do using photography, which is a technique which we've used in this case as well, is we were actually able to prove not just that the seat had moved, but we were able to prove by how much it had moved. And it wasn't just the seat moving forwards and backwards, but the back of the seat had been rotated back as well. We then looked at the images from the reconstruction that was done by the police's experts, and we noticed that The seat position was in the same position as we had scanned it. What that meant was the seat was not in the position that it was in at the time of the incident. By showing that there was that inconsistency, we understood that actually the reconstruction wasn't as sound as it was made out originally. We then produced digital reconstruction within the virtual world, and we then presented those results to the court.
So that was a comparison between the original crime scene photographs showing the seat in the position at the scene, and then the reconstructions had been completed using scans taken later of the car seat.
That is correct.
And your work involved comparing the two, the seat in the position at the scene and the seat later.
That is correct.
Thank you.
And then using 3D modeling to reconstruct that seat back to the original position as well.
Thank you. Let's move on to the next slide, slide 5, please. Tell us what we see here.
So the initial phrase, or the upper part of the screen, talks about the terms of reference. Apologies. And in the first contact from the inquiry, this is how we were effectively requested to be involved. It was very open, and it was basically just asking whether we could be of assistance and whether we had suitably skilled contractors to help advise the inquiry.
So that sets out the initial approach from the inquiry team.
Correct.
And what do we see at the bottom of the screen?
We obviously responded favourably to that because we felt that that fitted with us. But I think it was important from both our sides, from yours and from ours, to make sure that it was a good fit for each other. So we had an online interview with the legal and evidential team, and they talked us through a little bit more about the case and what they were hoping to get out from the digital reconstruction. We in turn replied back and talked to them about the types of work we've been doing. Expressly, the inquiry were interested in our impartiality and whether we could show impartiality in what we were doing. And then from BN, then we were requested to show CVs and lists of work taken. And the CVs weren't just our personal CVs, it was a business CV as well.
Right. And you were also asked to give a more detailed explanation of the type of work that you'd been doing since you left the Met.
That is correct.
And is that what we looked at on the previous slide, the breakdown?
Yes.
Thank you. Could you now please look at the next slide? Talk us through what this means, material review. What was this about?
So this slide is going to build up, and it's going to build up slowly in terms of our proposal to the inquiry on how we wanted to effectively take this forward and how we felt that we could assist the inquiry. And it would start with a detailed material review. At this point, we were only aware of several documents that had been given to us, but we were understood that was a huge tranche of material that still needed to be looked through and understood. So before we could really get down into the detail of it, we needed to have a material review of what was available to us.
So you were given some initial limited information, but then you required to go through the process of looking at all the information that would assist you.
That is correct.
Right. Explain the remainder of this slide.
So what we then propose, as I've mentioned before, is effectively the three columns that were going to form the digital reconstruction. The first is a digital twin capture of the scene. So this is taking the scene and making it virtual. The second is an assessment of objective material, and the last is an assessment of the subjective material. And we'll cover those definitions later. To capture the scene and make it digital, what we've done is we used three technologies and we captured those all at the same time. And those three technologies, from the output of those, we can produce a virtual model. However, that virtual model is only relevant to 2021 at the time that we captured the data. So what we had to do is remodel that back to 2015. And we've done that using evidence that was captured, either crime scene photography or a laser scan data of cassette from 2015. And we've used that to remodel key elements back to 2015. We also wanted to add on to that the exhibited material that was captured at the scene so that we had a full idea and a full picture of what the scene was like at the time. And that would effectively form our first product, which is a cloud accessible and virtual accessible 3D scene. Next, we were looking at the objective material, and here we were trying to take the timed events such as video and audio data and put this into a single timeline so that we could really understand when all of these events are happening within those data sets. We were going to use that in combination with the 3D data to determine people movement and vehicle movement within the scene. In conjunction with that, we were also going to assess the witness statements and put those in relation to the timeline. We refer to that as temporal later in this presentation. A combination of the two we hoped would let us identify people based on the 3D content and the statement, and we hope that that would then give us a real-time video showing people and vehicle movement, which would also include a 3D assessment as well. Lastly, we wanted to try and understand the statement information a little bit more, and we refer to this as the subjective material. And the aim would be to identify from the source material what areas would be suitable for reconstruction, and then filter those down to the areas that would be reconstructed. And that would basically form a digital brochure. And this is basically what we proposed at the start of the process.
So before we leave this slide, am I right in saying that slide 6 essentially is a summary? I don't know what the noise is. I think we'll just pause there for a second, if you don't mind. Well, it certainly seems to have gone off. So before we leave this slide, am I right in thinking that, just for the benefit of the chair, this is effectively a summary of where you're going to go and explain in the remainder of your slides? And there's 3 columns, the yellow, the green and the blue, and you're going to deal with each in detail as we go through the remainder. But if anyone wishes to look back at these slides in the future, this is the one that summarises where we're going.
That is correct.
Thank you. Well, let's, that noise doesn't seem to have started again, so let's move on to slide 7, please. Describe what we see here.
When we first looked through the material, we were doing that material review, it became very apparent that we could break the vast majority of the information that was provided into what we determine as objective material and subjective material. I'm going to read directly from the screen, but objective material is information that is not influenced by a person's feelings, opinions, in the representation of the facts. What that means is it's things like video, photography, audio, and measurements in the scene. They're things that over time will not change and will not degrade. We've also included into this column expert investigation statements, and this is generally when an expert has given the facts about the systems that we're talking about. So there are experts that talk about the ARLS system, and there are experts that then talk about the mobile and extracting information from that. And those we would consider as objective as well. Subjective is information that is based or influenced on a person's feeling, tastes, opinions, or experiences. So pretty much a person's memory. And into that, really the ones that we've used are public statements and police response statements and diagrams.
So before we leave this slide, I want to explore this distinction between objective and subjective. So when we look at the green tile, the objective material, it looks from the images or the icons you have there that this is recordings and audio tapes and measurements. So if we're looking at the measurement between 2 buildings, you've assumed certainly that the buildings haven't moved between 2015 and 2021.
So the 3D survey, and just to be clear, In 2015, on the evening of the events, whilst the scene was closed, Police Scotland returned back to the scene, and I believe it was a traffic collision unit came back and surveyed the scene as is. So we have that scene captured in 3D from 2015, and that would mean that that scene, the majority of it, hasn't changed in terms of buildings.
And that's something that you've based your work around.
Yes.
And then the subjective material, when we talk about subjective, that's witnesses' perspectives or recollections or that type of thing.
Yes.
But you've made a distinction between the two in the work that you've done and the way you've handled the material.
Yes.
Thank you. Let's move on to the next slide, please. And this shows the first column of the yellow areas, the first column of the work that you've done.
That's correct.
Right, slide 9, area of consideration or capture. So this is the first column. Could you tell the chair what we see here, please?
Sure. I'm just going to switch to a different system to explain this slide a little bit clearer. So when one of the first documents we received from the inquiry was the image that you see on the right-hand side without the blue area attached to it. So we had this red outline over that you can see. And what you can see over here is running from north to south is Henry Road. On the left-hand side of that, we have Temple Hall Avenue. And then to the right of that, we have Hayfield Road. Two other points to note, because we do reference them in what we do, is Arran Crescent is based over here, and Poplar Crescent is based just off Hayfield Road over here.
Could I stop you there for a second, please?
Yeah.
I'd just like to confirm that the chair and the assessors are able to see the markings that Mr. Di Giovanni has applied. Thank you, thank you. Well, thank you, that's very helpful. So, number 1, you've said is Henry Road, and that's travelling down the middle of the page from the top of the screen down.
That is correct.
And then 2 is Temple Hall Avenue.
Correct.
3 is Hayfield Road.
Correct.
4 is Arran Crescent.
That's correct.
And 5, you said, was?
Poplar Crescent.
Thank you. Carry on, please. You were going to move on to the area to be surveyed.
So once we reviewed the core material, and this was the base statements and the CCTV footage, we recommended back that the full area of survey didn't require to be within all of this red area, and we recommended a much smaller area, which is that blue highlighted area.
What area does the blue area cover?
So it does cover Henry Road up to the 2 roundabouts. So there's the roundabout off to Temple Hall Avenue, and around 30 metres down Temple Hall Avenue. It then runs down to the roundabout with Hayfield Road, and on that road there is the Gallagher's Public House, which is also included in the survey.
Could you point to the areas of the roundabouts that you've mentioned?
So the Temple Hall roundabout is over here, just south of the 1 marker, and the Hayfield Road roundabout is just south of that, between the 1 and the 5 lines, and where they meet up over here.
And where is Gallagher's Pub in this map?
So Gallagher's Pub is just to the southwest of that junction.
Thank you. Could we move on to the next slide, please? So going back to your slides, number 10, please. And this is headed 3D digital twin capture equipment used.
Yes.
Tell us what we see here.
So in December of 2021, I attended the scene with numerous other contractors, and our aim was to capture those those 3 digital data sets. The first one that we're going to talk about is the 3D laser scanner data set. And for that, we used a Faro S150 laser scanner. The 150 refers to the range at which the scanner operates at. This is a tripod-mounted device, so it sits up on a tripod and it rotates around. And as it's doing so, it captures a dome of information of 3D points back into the scene. The dome is defined by the third point down, where it talks about a 300 vertical axis and a 360 horizontal axis. And that represents the dome of capture from each position. After it's captured that position, we move it through the scene, and we do that through the whole of the area. Over a 2-day period, we captured 80 scans across the surveyed area. The accuracy of the equipment that we're using at 10 meters is 2 millimeters, and at 25 meters is 3.5. At 25 meters is 3.5 millimeters. The features that you see on the bottom of that list are basically there to help us tie all of these scan positions together. So as we move this equipment through the scene, it's capturing certain, taking more sensor information that allows us to reconstruct this back into a single point cloud.
The photo on this, is that a picture of the type of scanner that you've been describing?
That is correct.
And it's on a tripod, and you've said it moves through the scene. Can you help us understand what you mean by that?
So each dome of information is captured at a static position, and it takes about 5 minutes with color to capture that one position. So whilst it's capturing that position, that scanner does not move. After it's finished capturing that position, you pick the unit up, we move around 10-15 meters to the next position, place it down, and then restart the scanner again. And that means that as we progress through the scene, we capture more and more information of that scene. And the process then is to stitch all of that together to give us an accurate 3D model of the scene.
And you've talked about moving it 10 metres, and I'm looking at the 2 millimetre accuracy at 10 metres. Is the distance that you move it determined because of the accuracy that you have?
That is one consideration. The other is if you move the scanner, there's 2 other issues. If you move the scanner too far, then trying to register these point clouds together becomes an issue. And also, the further you move these apart, you get areas where there's fewer points in between those scan positions. So we try to balance the time we have available on site with the quality of the scan settings that we put on, with the distance that we position the scanner. And it's about combining those 3 factors together to capture the scene in the best way.
And that's what you did here?
That's correct.
And you mentioned a moment ago the dome that it scans. Does that have much impact in an outdoor scene?
Normally it's more relevant to an indoor scene, especially when you're trying to capture the entire room and roof areas. I just reference it because that is what the scanner is capable of.
Thank you. Let's move on to the next tile, please. Tell us what we see here.
In a previous slide, I referred to it as a drone capture, but here I refer to it as UAV scene capture. They mean exactly the same thing. So an unmanned aerial vehicle, or effectively a drone, is used to fly the scene and capture as many images as we can. We had certain limitations that were applied upon us being able to use this equipment because of the location to the hospital and the major route that Hayfield Road is running out from that hospital. In order to fly a sort of a heavier drone with a higher pixel resolution, we would have to be required to have control of that scene, which would include road closures. We weren't comfortable with that because of the location. So we opted to use a slightly lower resolution system, but one that we felt was adequate and suitable, still fit for the purpose.
How many images did you secure from that drone?
We captured over 2,500 images.
Tell us a little bit about this level of accuracy of those images.
So each image that we capture is effectively 12 megapixels. Generally, that's still considered a high quality image.
Thank you. And the concerns about the location, is that what you were saying about the location of the nearby hospital?
Correct.
Thank you. Move on to the last tile, please. And tell us what we see here.
So in combination to these other two elements, what we apply is a more traditional form of survey where we're actually measuring specific points throughout the scene. For that, we're using a piece of equipment called an EDM. And this is and a GPS system. And these two systems combined are used to locate a series of points, over 500 points across the scene. And we're putting these onto what we call OSGB 36, which is a UK mapping coordinate system. The reason we want to do that is twofold. One, it allows us to put this model onto British mapping coordinate system so that when we take a point on the model, we can reference that back to a mapping coordinate and we can understand that position on another system if we so choose. The other reason is by capturing these survey control, we can use some of these points to control the entire model and effectively use it as a structure to keep the accuracy of the model high. The rest of the points can be used then to validate the accuracy of the work that's been done and the accuracy of the model.
So this equipment allows you to cross-check the accuracy of the other work that you've done.
That's correct.
And remind us, what's the accuracy that you achieve with this?
This equipment, generally for the work that we were doing, would be between 2 and 3 millimeters across the site.
Thank you. Would you move on to slide 11, please? Describe what the chair can see here.
So this is an overview of the model that was generated. Running from top to bottom, you can see, and I'll just use my mouth to run over this, you can see there's Henry Road running up and down. To the southwest of the Hayfield roundabout, you can see Gallagher's Pub. If we come up north of that to the other roundabout, you can see Temple Hall Avenue running to the left to right. And then we can see Hayfield Road, running across from this lower roundabout. And then you've got the entrances to Poplar Crescent on either side over here.
Thank you. Then move on to slide 12.
So these are some closer images of the model, just to show the quality that we were able to establish from the combined data set. And it's picked up a remarkable amount of detail within that 3D model.
So these are extracted from the 3D model that we saw previously a moment ago,
That's correct.
but they're examples of what can be done, what can be achieved from that.
Yes.
So what do we see on the left-hand tile?
So the left-hand tile is Hayfield Road, and this is the approaching the junction with a roundabout, and you can see the crossing just to the lower end of that image.
Thank you. And when you say you're approaching the roundabout, is that what we can see, where we see the road markings on the right-hand side of that first tile?
That is correct.
The middle tile?
This is Temple Hall Avenue, looking towards the roundabout, and you can see the crossing or the junction in the middle.
Thank you. So that's from Temple Hall Avenue to the junction at Henry Road,
That is correct.
with the Henry Road roundabout.
That is correct.
And then the third tile,
This is Henry Road, and I'll refer to it as the north end of Henry Road, and this is the Shell garage, which is towards the edge of that data set. We also have a video which outlines all of these positions.
could I ask you to go back and just look at the 3D model that we looked at a moment ago and just pinpoint where those three images have been taken from?
Sure. So Hayfield Road image is taken from this area here,
That's on at Hayfield Road,
on Hayfield Road, just near the junction.
near the roundabout. That was the first image.
Correct.
And the second image?
The second image is Temple Hall Avenue, looking towards Henry Road. So the virtual camera would be around this position, pointing towards the roundabout over here.
And do we see the houses at the top of that road at Temple Hall?
Just here,
Yes.
yes.
And then the third image, where was that taken from?
So the third image is just showing the garage, the petrol station, which is just to the north end of Hendry Road, which is shown over here.
Thank you. And can we look at those images again? Thank you. Can we look at the next slide, please? So this is remodeling the scene, and it's slide 13. Tell us what we see on this slide.
So, as I previously explained, the data set that we would capture, because all the data came from December 2021, the resultant model would be from 2021. So what we try to do is look at the available evidence from 2015 and understand the differences between the 2021 data set and the 2015 data set. And what we identified was approximately between 20 and 25 areas where the scene had varied.
So the photographs that have just come on the screen, that's areas of variation.
Correct.
And is that the small black circles with the red exclamation mark in them?
That is correct.
And could you give me an example of what you did with those areas where there was that variation between 2015 and 2021?
So we produced a reference document with each of these variances, and we supplied those to the inquiry team, and we basically asked them to explain, to tell us which ones they felt were relevant for us to remodel back to 2015, and which ones they felt weren't relevant or weren't significant enough for us to model back to the 2015 data set.
Can you give an example of an area of variation where you were told not to change it back to what it was in 2015?
So one of those areas is there's a fence which has been built by the Gallagher Public House. It's a low fence and it doesn't interfere with the field of view of the camera, and it's just felt that that wouldn't affect the understanding of the scene, nor would it contribute to anyone giving evidence. So that's something that we decided that the inquiry decided wasn't relevant.
And can you give examples of areas where you were asked to change the scene back to 2015?
So two of the most critical areas that we were asked to look at was the bus stop area. There's been significant modelling on the pavement, and where the bus stop originally was, that has now been effectively created as an additional pavement. What we noticed as well is actually that change runs pretty much all the way back to the crossing on Hayfield Road. So there's been a significant change to that pavement width from that position onwards. The second area was the path, which, as you can see from the image above, runs from the bus stop area and in 2021 comes out at a crossing which is roughly midway between the two roundabouts. Back in 2015, that was much further south, and it was nearer this red exclamation mark you can see that I'm circling here.
So there were some areas identified where you were asked to remodel it back to 2015.
That is correct.
Thank you. Would you turn to the next slide, slide 14, please? Tell us what we see here.
So this is basically the remodeled scene. So we've taken the majority of the 2021 data set, but in those two areas, so the bus stop, as you can see now, we've reconditioned that back to the 2015 data set, and you can actually see the line work has been reconstructed as well. Additionally, we've reconstructed the path, which runs much closer to the tree line on the edge of Hayfield Road. And we also were able to bring back some of the trees that were removed at the time of undertaking this work as well.
Thank you. Can we turn to the next slide, please? Or, yes, tell us what this shows.
So here we've just got some more visuals of the model and where, from closer in angles, just to view effectively what's been created. On the left-hand side, again, you can see the pavement area of the bus stop has been reconstructed. On the right-hand side, you can see that we've reconstructed the path, as I say, a lot closer to the junction.
So looking at the left-hand side tile, we see the bus stop on Hayfield Road.
Correct.
And that's looking towards the roundabout with Henry Road.
That's correct.
And we see the vehicles on the left-hand side of Hayfield Road.
Yes.
And then on the right-hand side tile that we see on the screen, this is taken from Henry Road,
That is correct.
looking towards the path that leads to Hayfield Road.
Again, that's correct.
And on the right-hand side of that tile, we can see some of the road markings that indicate the roundabout on Henry Road.
Yes.
Thank you. The next slide, please. What do these images show?
So, as I've previously mentioned, in 2015, Police Scotland captured the scene with their own device. I believe it was a Leica P20. And they captured the area from 3 locations. So it wasn't a significant capture of the area, but it did cover the critical area that was cordoned off. That data was very useful because it captured information within that scene that otherwise we would have had to reconstruct back from photography.
And so these 4 images are, well, view 1 from Henry Road junction to Hayfield Road.
Correct.
View 2, which is at the bottom left-hand side of the screen, is from Hayfield Road towards the junction with Henry Road.
That is correct.
And then view 3 is an overview of Henry Road and Hayfield Road junction.
Yes.
And view 4, bottom right-hand side of the screen, is an overview of Henry Road and Hayfield Road junction.
Yes.
It
Can I
looks-
just explain just one thing on this
Yes.
as well? You'll notice that on that image 4, the data goes from being sort of quite well coloured to being almost black. The reason for that is these scans were done late in the evening. So they were done, I believe, around 10 o'clock at night. And the reason obviously that's black is because at that point the onboard camera would not pick up any light source. So that's just to explain why that looks the way it does. But the most important thing is the 3D data that it captured was still accurate because the way this system works, it works in all lighting conditions.
So even though it was dark, you could still get the data from this scan.
Correct.
And we see on these images, see the bottom, the final view, view 4, it says, this image is produced by 3D laser scan data captured by Police Scotland on the evening of the 3rd of May 2015.
That is correct.
Thank you. Let's move on. Tell us what we see here.
So this slide explains how we utilised that 2015 data set. On the left-hand side, you can see that we've positioned these yellow paper clips. What these represent is exhibit markers that were placed in the scene by the officers that have been captured by the laser scan data. So what we're able to do is reposition those markers accurately back into the scene to their exact location that they were in 2015. And we're able to do that because of the data set that was provided to us.
And those are the yellow evidence markers that we see with numbers on them.
Correct.
What do we see on the right-hand side of this screen?
So on the right-hand side, we see, again, the 2015 laser scan data set. And what highlights here is the vehicles that were captured. The scene was closed earlier that day, and the scene was kept closed through the whole day. So what we know is that the vehicles that we see positioned in here were positioned at the same time during the police response. So it allows us to be able to understand not only the makes and the types of the model, but also to reposition them back into the scene, into their exact location that they were, again, at the time of the restraint.
When you say the makes and the models, did you do any additional work to identify the shapes and?
So yeah, where we could, we identified license plates from the crime scene photography, and then we used that with the DVLA database to try and understand the make and model of each vehicle. Where we couldn't purchase a specific model type to be able to put into the scene, we took one which was as close to the actual one that we could find. But generally, we made sure that it would match in general shape, size, and appearance.
Thank you. Can we move on to slide 17, please? This is headed knife location. Talk to us about this.
Not all of the exhibited information was captured in the laser scan data, because some of it was removed prior to the laser scan data taking place. A key element, or one of the key exhibits for this, would be the knife. And this is the only evidence that we really have about the location of the knife is this one image, which I believe was captured by Connell, DC Connell on his mobile phone. So because of that, we wanted to try and understand its exact location in the scene, and we wanted to do it using a more scientific technique. So we introduced a technique called photogrammetry. More precisely, we use, it's known as laser scan assisted photogrammetry. And this is where we're using points and common points between a laser scan data set and an image to be able to understand the parameters of that camera. That would include the position, the orientation, and the lens distortion coefficients that define where and how that camera projects back into the scene. What we can then do is we can then use the laser scan data to outline the position and locate that knife back into the scene.
And that's the work that you carried out in relation to this one image of a knife at the scene.
Correct.
And when we say the scene, this is an image of Hayfield Road, or part of Hayfield Road.
That is correct.
Thank you.
I think just this last image as well, because we're working within the laser scan data set when we're doing the analysis, it means that the knife location that we identify within the photogrammetry is also the knife position within the 3D model that we've established. And that also ties into the mapping coordinates that we talked about earlier.
And the window or the tile that's just appeared at the bottom right-hand side of the screen shows Hayfield Road, and we can see a white outline, which is the knife.
Correct.
And why is there a red exclamation mark circle next to that?
Literally, that was just a note that was placed in there so that in the 3D model I can click on that and it'll just show me an image of the knife. That's
Thank you. Moving on to the next slide, please. This is slide 18. You're going to demonstrate the interactive 3D scene now.
correct.
Just briefly talk us through this image, first of all.
So I hope by now with the work we've done with the maps, you can start to understand the 3D model and the layout that we're talking about. So from north to south, we have Hendry Road. The more northerly roundabout leads off to Temple Hall Avenue. And the south roundabout leads to Hendry Road. And again, here we can... Hayfield Road, my apologies.
Not at all. Hayfield Road.
Hayfield Road. And again, we've got the entrances to Poplar Crescent along that road.
And show us Gallagher's Pub on this.
So Gallagher's Pub is in this corner here.
Thank you.
And what I can do is I can come into this model. We can take a closer look.
So you're zooming in now into the model.
Correct. So the model is designed to work over the cloud. So effectively what that means is as we move into an area, the model will refine and it will load more detail as it needs to fill in the gaps.
And you're showing us on the screen Gallagher's Pub.
Correct. We can go up as well and we can have a look at Temple Hall Avenue. And here we see the first junction.
And is this the area where we saw a slide previously, actually, a tile?
Correct. Yeah.
And that was on Temple Hall Avenue, looking towards the roundabout with Henry Road.
Yes.
And we can see the markings on the road near the roundabout.
Yes.
Thank you.
And we can just go up and then just quickly show the north extent of the model, which includes the Shell garage.
And that's on Henry Road.
Correct.
And then can we look in the other direction down Henry Road? Thank you. And then would you perhaps show us Hayfield Road?
Yes. So as you can see, the model loads as we move into those areas.
Okay. If you could pause there for a moment. So we're seeing a view from the roundabout at Henry Road. Gallagher's pub is behind this point in the road, and we're looking down along Hayfield Road
That is correct.
with the houses on the right,
That is correct.
and the bus stop in the distance on the left, and we can see the path that leads between the trees.
Yes.
And those are the areas that you've highlighted earlier.
Yes.
And on this screen, on the left-hand side of that road, we can see the red exclamation mark. Is that where the...
That is correct. And as we open that up, we can see just an image, a cropped image of the knife location.
Thank you. And we see those yellow paper clips on the right-hand side.
Again, these are the exhibit labels as previously seen.
Thank you. And as part of this interactive scene, is it possible to insert characters into this scene?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Could you demonstrate that, please?
So we call this a line of sight tool, and it allows us to select a point within the scene. We can give them gender. We can choose a posture between just standing and kneeling. And we can either use a generic height, which is about average 95th percentile and 5th percentile, or we can give a custom height within this area. I'm just going to make this person blue so he sticks out. Click on save.
So you've used a drop-down menu to create a character,
Correct.
who can be inserted into the scene.
Correct.
And you've placed a blue person now, male one, next to a lamppost on Hayfield Road at the roundabout with Henry Road.
Yes.
Thank you. And are you able to move that person around, or?
Yes, so we can move this person within the scene, so we can rotate and translate him. And I could, for example, rotate him around to face the bus stop area.
So we now see the blue person in the scene looking down Hayfield Road
Correct.
towards the bus stop area.
Correct.
And if we wanted to calculate the distance between the bus stop area and where the person's standing in the scene, is that something you're able to do?
Yes, so what we're able to do, for example, is I can take a view where I can see my figure and the bus stop, and we can apply what we call a polygon measurement. We can go from the position of the male, and we can take a general location to approximately near the bus stop, and that would give us a figure of 65 meters in this case.
Right. And the measurement we see there is always going to be in meters.
Correct.
And does this allow you to calculate a number of measurements at one time on the screen?
Yes, and these can range from point to point, or we can understand the height of an object, or we can understand information about angles or areas even.
When you say angles, would you explain what you mean by that?
Not entirely sure whether it's something that would be used, but here we go. What it allows us to do is, for example, we can select 3 points within the scene, and that will give us an angle to each of those 3 points to understand that angular information.
Is it also something, is it possible to work out the difference in height between certain items?
Yeah, so for example, if I wanted to understand the height of this lamppost, we've got a specific tool that allows us to take a top and bottom measurement, and it will only provide the height of that specific object between those 2 points. So it ignores effectively the x, y coordinates and just shows you the height.
Thank you. Would you now please move on to your next slide, slide 19.
Graham, I wonder, this might be a good point to stop for lunch.
It would be.
Yes. Very well, we'll stop now and sit again at 2 o'clock.